The lunch tin was my grandmother's. Dented aluminum, olive gray paint worn down to bare metal at the corners, a rubber seal that had been replaced twice and still leaked if you tilted it wrong. I had carried it on 41 years of Federation supply contracts across 11 systems, and it had never once failed to hold a meal. My grandmother would have called that a recommendation. I called it stubbornness, which is the same thing. I set it on the bench beside me at 9:40 on a Tuesday in the 4th month of what the Keth Varol ring-belt calendar called the low season, and I opened it, and the child on the other end of the bench turned her head and looked at the food inside it the way the very hungry learn to look at things, not with longing, not with demand, but with a careful, sealed expression that had been trained to show nothing at all. She was small, pale mint-gray skin, pointed ears delicate as a leaf edge, folded slightly forward in what I later learned was a Velasari expression of sustained wariness. Her eyes were amber, the deep burnt honey amber that the Velasari carry in their eldest bloodlines, and they were too large for her face in the way that suggests a child still growing into themselves. She wore a gray shift dress, plain cut clean but worn thin at the elbows and hem. No shoes, no transit chip visible at her wrist, no adult beside her. She had been sitting on that bench when I arrived at the Level 3 processing concourse at 8:20. I had noted her the way you note furniture, registering the shape, not the meaning. Then my supply clearance got kicked back by the Keth Varol Manifest Authority for a coding dispute on 6 containers of agricultural compound, and I sat down to wait, and somewhere between 8:20 and 9:40, I had begun to understand that not one person in that concourse, not the 3 processing clerks at the intake desks, not the pair of transit wardens doing a slow circuit of the hall, not the 40-odd travelers waiting on their own clearances, had looked at the child once. Not a glance, not a redirect, not a raised eyebrow. She was invisible to them in the specific way that certain children learn to be invisible, and the learning is never accidental. I opened the lunch tin and took out half a grain bread roll. I had 2. I set the spare half on the bench between us without looking at her directly, the same way you set out food for a stray animal that will bolt if you make it feel cornered, and I began eating my own half and looking at the manifest dispute forms in my lap as though they were the most interesting thing in the room. She did not move for 4 minutes. I know because I counted, the way you count when you have learned to be patient with frightened things. Then a small hand reached across the bench and took the bread. I did not look up. I turned a page of the forms. Outside the long concourse windows the ring-belt arc curved away into pale gold morning light, cargo haulers moving in slow transit lanes, the gas giant Kethvar hanging enormous and amber in the middle distance. It was, by any measure, an ordinary Tuesday in the low season on a mid-tier waystation that processed 6,000 travelers a day, and remembered none of them. I turned another page. Beside me, very quietly, the child ate. The manifest dispute took 3 days to resolve. This is not unusual. The Keth Varol Manifest Authority operates on a principle I have observed across 9 of the 11 systems I have worked in, namely, that any document which can be disputed will be disputed, and any dispute which can be prolonged will be prolonged, and any prolongation which generates a clearance fee will generate one. I had budgeted 4 days on Keth Varol Station, and I was content enough to wait. What I had not budgeted was coming back to the Level 3 concourse the next morning and finding the child still on the same bench. Same dress, same bare feet, same careful, sealed expression. She had positioned herself in the corner where the bench met the wall, back protected on 2 sides, which is not a thing a child does by accident. There was nothing beside her, no bag, no object, no food. She had been there through the night cycle, or close enough to it that the distinction did not matter. I sat down at the same end of the bench. I opened the lunch tin. This time she watched me do it openly. Amber eyes tracking the motion without embarrassment, having apparently decided that whatever category of person I occupied was not immediately dangerous. I took out a portion of cold grain porridge in a sealed cup and a small packet of dried fruit. I set the fruit packet on the bench between us. I began eating the porridge. She took the fruit packet in 11 seconds. I know because I counted again. The interval was shortening. I said in standard, not looking at her, "Is there someone coming to meet you?" She said nothing. "You don't have to answer," I said. "I'm asking because if there is someone coming, that's fine and I'll leave you alone. If there isn't, that's also fine and I'll still leave you alone. I'm just a supply contractor waiting on a paperwork dispute. I'm not from the authority." Silence. I ate porridge. Then, very quietly, in standard with a velocari tonal inflection that turned the vowels slightly flat, "Nobody is coming." "All right," I said. I finished the porridge. I put the cup back in the tin. I said, "I'll be in this concourse most of today. I'll be back tomorrow morning. If you're hungry in the meantime, the Level 2 commissary has a self-service machine on the east wall that takes Federation standard chits. I don't know if you have chits." I took 2 standard chits from my jacket pocket and set them on the bench without looking at her. "Those are small denominations. The machine gives change." I stood up, picked up the tin, and walked back to the manifest dispute desk. When I glanced back from the desk queue, the chits were gone. I have been asked in the years since why I did it. The question usually carries an implication that there must have been a calculation, a read on the situation, some foreknowledge that made the investment sensible. People prefer that version. It is tidier. The honest answer is that I noticed her because I am the kind of person who notices things that have been made invisible, and once I noticed her, I could not unnotice her. And once I could not unnotice her, the course of action was not complicated. She was small and hungry and alone in a busy hall where every official eye was sliding past her on purpose, and I had food and I had time and I had nothing particular at stake. The calculus was not sophisticated. My grandmother would have said, "You feed what is hungry. You sit with what is alone. Everything else is commentary." She was not wrong about many things. The second day unfolded slowly. I had more forms to review, more delays on the agricultural compound coding dispute, and the manifest office sent a correction request that required me to produce original shipping documentation I had filed on Kethvan Station 4 months prior, which meant an hour on the comms terminal tracking down a copy. I did all of it at the Level 3 bench, which was large enough to spread papers on, and quiet enough in the mid-morning lull that I could think. Soviel sat at her end. She had established, without negotiation, a working distance between us, perhaps a meter of bench, more than arm's reach, less than deliberate separation. She watched the concourse. She watched the Level 3 windows. She watched me, periodically, with the patience of a creature who has learned to read other creatures carefully before making any decisions about them. I had brought extra portions. I set them on the bench between us in the same manner as before, present, not offered, not withheld. She took them in her own time. This was the arrangement, and it worked without either of us discussing it. Around mid-morning she said, without preamble, "What is in the containers?" I looked up from the shipping documentation. "Which containers?" "The ones you are arguing about." She nodded toward the forms in my lap, with the manifest authority. "Agricultural compound," I said. "Soil nitrogen supplement specifically. For a settlement on Kethoron set that is trying to establish a grain crop in highland plateau soil. The soil is deficient in the micronutrients the grain needs. The compound corrects the deficiency." She considered this. "You carry dirt medicine," she said. "In a sense," I said. 41 years of it. 6 systems. My contracts are mostly with frontier settlements that can't import what they need through standard channels because the standard channels are too slow or too expensive for a settlement that is, itself, still deciding whether to survive. "And this settlement," she said, "Kethoron set, will it survive?" "If the grain crop takes," I said. "If the soil accepts the compound and the rains come on schedule and 3 other things I can't control go approximately right, then yes, probably. I turned a page. In this work you learn not to say definitely. You learn to say probably, and then you do the next thing and the thing after that, and you stay available when the next problem comes. She was quiet for a moment, processing this in whatever way she processed things. That is what you do, she said eventually, not a question. It is what I do, I agreed. It is a good thing to do, she said. It was not a polite observation. It was a considered verdict, the kind a person delivers after weighing the evidence seriously. I did not know what to say to it, so I said nothing and went back to the shipping documentation, and we sat together in the mid-morning quiet of the Level 3 concourse, while the cargo haulers moved outside in the amber light, and the waystation processed its 6,000 daily travelers, and the reclamation authority worked its way down through the levels toward us. That afternoon, I found her sitting differently. I had gone to the Level 2 commissary for an hour to eat a proper hot meal and use their comms terminal, and when I came back, she had shifted position on the bench, no longer corner-anchored, back to wall, but sitting somewhat forward, elbows on knees, watching something in the concourse with focused attention. I followed her gaze. 2 children, a pair of Veleron boys, perhaps slightly older than she appeared, were sitting on the floor near the opposite wall, playing some kind of hand pattern game with a small cloth bag of stones. They were intent on it, calling out in Veleron, the bag going back and forth. Ordinary, uncomplicated, the kind of small child occupation that does not require anything of the world except a few feet of floor. Soviel watched them with an expression I had not seen on her before. It was not wistful, exactly, and it was not sad. It was the expression of someone cataloging a thing they understand intellectually, but have not recently had access to. I sat down. After a moment she said, I used to play that game, a different version, with my cousins. When? I said. Before, she said, and then did not continue. I did not push. The word held everything it needed to hold, and pressing it would have gained nothing and cost something I was not entitled to spend. We watched the boys until they packed up their stones and left with an adult who came to collect them, and then the floor where they had been was empty floor again, and Soviel sat back against the wall, and the sealed expression came back, and the afternoon moved on. On the second afternoon, I was sitting with my forms when a Level 3 transit warden did his slow circuit past the bench, and his gaze passed over the child without registering. I watched his eyes. They did not stop, did not slow, did not flicker. She was as visible to him as the wall behind her. I had been a Federation supply contractor long enough to recognize administrative invisibility when I saw it. It is a specific and cultivated condition, the result of someone, somewhere up the processing chain, having coded a transit record in a way that instructed the authorities' personnel to treat a subject as non-present. It is not done by accident. It requires a keyboard and an intention. I went to the manifest dispute desk that afternoon, and while I was waiting for my turn, I found the Kethverol Waystation Public Transit Registry and ran a search on unregistered Velosari minor dependents currently logged as present on the station. The registry returned 0 results. Then I ran a search on Velosari transit records flagged with a reclamation authority hold status in the past 30 days. The registry returned 41 results, all adults, all processed through Level 5, the upper-tier commercial deck. Then I ran a search on the phrase Velosari Reclamation Authority in the station's Public Administrative Bulletin Board, which posts processing notices for any regulatory body operating on station with the authority's permission. The Bulletin Board returned a notice dated 6 days prior. The Velosari Reclamation Authority, acting under the Provisional Dissolution Charter of House Velosaketh, was conducting a status verification sweep of all Velosari nationals present on Kethverol station. Any Velosari national unable to produce a current status certification, either free compact citizen or confirmed non-bonded, was subject to provisional reclassification under the House dissolution protocols pending review by the Charter Tribunal. Reclassification under House dissolution protocols meant, in plain language, that your legal standing as a free person was suspended, while someone decided whether the house that had owned your bloodline's registration records still had a claim on you. The process took anywhere from 3 months to 3 years. While it was ongoing, you were legally indeterminate, which meant, in the practical language of waystation processing, that you did not exist. The child on the bench did not exist. Someone had made sure of it. And the Reclamation Authority was moving through this station, and they would reach level 3, and when they did they would find a small, indeterminate child sitting on a bench, and they would process her under the dissolution protocols, and she would disappear into a tribunal queue and not come out the other side as herself. I sat with this for a while. Then I went back to the manifest dispute desk, and I asked to speak to the senior clearance officer about a secondary matter. And when she came out, I told her I needed to know which Federation provisions covered the temporary protective custody of an unregistered minor on a compact-affiliated waystation. She looked at me for a moment. She was a Velaron woman, middle-aged, with the particular expression of a person who has seen this kind of thing before and has a professionally maintained neutrality about it. She said, Article 16 of the Compact Waystation Charter, subsection 4, any Federation-registered contractor or citizen may assert a 72-hour protective hold on an unregistered minor, renewable once, pending compact safe passage review. The hold suspends all other processing claims against the minor for the duration. Does it need to be filed in person? At the safe passage desk, level 2, East Wing. She paused. It needs to be filed before the minor is approached by any other regulatory body. Once they've initiated a processing contact, the window closes. Thank you, I said. She nodded once and went back behind the desk. I walked back to the level 3 concourse. The child was still on the bench. No one had approached her yet. I sat down, opened the lunch tin. I had restocked it at the level 2 commissary and set a portion of seeded flatbread on the bench between us. While she ate, I said, I need to ask you something and you don't have to answer. There's a group called the Reclamation Authority. Do you know what that is? A long pause. The flatbread disappeared in small, careful bites. Then, yes. They're on the station. They're doing a sweep. I think they're going to find this level in the next day or 2. I kept my voice level, matter of fact, the way you speak to someone who has already been frightened enough that adding more fear to the register accomplishes nothing. There's a provision I can file that puts a hold on any processing claim against you for 72 hours. It's a Federation provision. The Reclamation Authority can't override it. It's built into the Waystation Charter. I'd like to file it if you'll let me. She was quiet for a long time. I watched the cargo haulers move in the panel windows. The amber light of Kethvar shifted incrementally across the floor. Why, she said. Because you're a child and you're alone, and I have the provision available to me, and it costs me nothing to use it. Another long pause. They will be angry, she said. The authority, when they find her, find me. I noted the slip, her, then corrected to me, but I filed it away and did not remark on it. They can be as angry as they like, I said. The provision is the provision. What they feel about it doesn't change what it says. I stood up, brushed crumbs off my jacket and picked up the tin. I'll file it now, I said. You don't need to do anything, just stay on the bench. She looked up at me for the first time directly, amber eyes steady. The wariness still there, but something else underneath it now. Something careful and assessing that was older than her face. Your food is good, she said. It was not quite what she meant, but it was what she had the words for. My grandmother's recipe, I said, and went to file the hold. The safe passage desk on level 2 East Wing was staffed by a compact-built human man named Oren Vaz, who who had the deep tiredness of someone who had been fighting small bureaucratic battles for 30 years, and had won enough of them to keep going. He took my contractor registration, my Federation citizenship credential, and the child's approximate location details, and he processed the Article 16 hold in 11 minutes without asking me why or whether I was sure. When he handed me the receipt, a narrow slip of laminated station print, the hold registration number in black type along the top, he said, "The hold runs 72 hours from the timestamp. If the Reclamation Authority makes contact before you can renew, call this desk directly. The hold number is your proof of precedence. Don't let anyone take it." I folded the slip and put it in my breast pocket. "Has this come up before?" I said. "The dissolution sweep, children in the processing queue." He looked at me with the expression of a man who had been diplomatic about this for a long time and was deciding how diplomatic to be now. "It's the third sweep in 8 months, he said. "The Velasari Reclamation Authority has a charter tribunal mandate that runs for another 14 months. After that, the dissolution protocols lapse and every outstanding case defaults to free citizen status." He straightened the papers on his desk. 14 months is a long time for a tribunal queue." "Yes," I said, "it is." I went back downstairs. The Reclamation Authority found Level 3 on the morning of the third day. I was already on the bench when they arrived, 3 of them, 2 in the gray-silver field uniforms of Velasari administrative officers, and 1 in the formal dark blue of a senior charter tribunal representative. They moved through the concourse methodically, stopping at the intake desks, reviewing something on a handheld unit, then turning and scanning the hall. Their eyes found the child on the bench almost immediately. I had expected that. The administrative invisibility that had been coded into her transit record would not function as a shield against the Reclamation Authority's own processing units. They would have the codes to cut through it, or the records that told them where to look regardless. Someone had made her invisible to the waystation's general staff. The authority itself had always known where she was. They had simply been working their way down through the levels. The senior representative, a tall Velasari woman with silver-streaked hair cut close and the particular stillness of someone accustomed to encountering resistance, walked toward the bench. The 2 field officers positioned themselves at angles, not aggressive, not blocking, but present in the way that made clear the geometry of the situation. I stayed on the bench. The representative stopped at a distance of approximately 2 meters and addressed the child in Velasari, which I do not speak. The child said nothing. Her posture did not change, back to the wall, feet flat on the floor, amber eyes forward. The representative shifted to standard. "Minor of Velasari National Registry. You are subject to provisional reclassification under the Provisional Dissolution Charter of House Velasquez. Please present your status certification or submit to temporary custodial processing." The child still said nothing. The representative's gaze moved to me. It was a professional gaze, measuring, not hostile, the gaze of someone accustomed to obstacles and practiced at removing them efficiently. "Contractor," she said, "please step away from this minor. She is subject to Reclamation Authority jurisdiction under Charter Tribunal mandate." I reached into my breast pocket and took out the hold slip. I held it out flat in my palm, not aggressive, not theatrical, just present. "Article 16, Compact Waystation Charter, subsection 4, I said. "Protective hold registered at 1447 yesterday, hold number KV 394. It runs through 1447 today. While the hold is active, all processing claims against the registered minor are suspended. I filed it correctly and the safe passage desk confirmed it. The number is on the slip." The representative did not take the slip. She looked at it. A brief calculation moved behind her eyes. "The hold is a waystation provision," she said. "The Reclamation Authority's mandate is a charter tribunal instrument. Tribunal instruments take precedence over waystation provisions. The Compact Waystation Charter disagrees, I said. Article 16, subsection 4 specifies that the protective hold suspends all other processing claims. It uses the word all. I checked. The charter was written before the dissolution protocol framework existed. The tribunal mandate supersedes it by temporal precedence. That's a legal interpretation, I said. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to argue legal interpretation with you. What I can tell you is that the hold slip in my hand is a valid registered instrument, and I intend to stand on it until 1447 today. And if you believe the tribunal mandate supersedes it, you're welcome to take that dispute to the safe passage desk, where Orrin Vaz has the hold registration and can speak to it. He's on level 2, East Wing. She looked at me for a long moment. The two field officers were still at their angles. The concourse had gone somewhat quieter around us, not silent, but with the specific quality of a space where peripheral attention has been redirected toward one point. Why, she said, the same word the child had asked me. Different register, less honest, more tactical. I have a hold slip, I said. That's sufficient. Contractor. You have no connection to this minor. You have no legal relationship. You have filed a welfare hold on a child you encountered on a transit bench. What do you expect to accomplish? 72 hours, I said. After that, the Charter Safe Passage Office will conduct its review, and whatever it determines will be whatever it determines. I'm not trying to accomplish anything beyond what the provision covers. She was silent for a moment. Then she looked past me at the child, and something crossed her expression, not softness, not reconsideration, but a faint recalibration, as though she had just noticed something. Then she looked back at me, and her expression returned to its professional neutrality, and she said, "We will verify the hold registration with the safe passage desk. If the hold is confirmed valid, we will return at 1447. She paused. If the hold is confirmed, contractor. If it is not, we will return before then. That seems reasonable, I said. She turned and walked back toward the concourse entrance, the two field officers falling in behind her. At the entrance she paused, said something to the officers in Velasari, and then all three of them left the concourse. I let out a breath I had been managing since they arrived. I put the hold slip back in my pocket. Beside me, the child said very quietly, "They will come back." At 1447, I said, which gives us about 6 hours. The safe passage review takes time. Vaz told me the process is between 4 and 8 hours for a full review. If we can get a review started now, the hold may extend automatically while the review is in progress. I stood up. I looked down at her. I want to take you to the safe passage desk, I said. Level 2, East Wing. You will have to come with me. You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to talk to. I'll do the talking, but I think it will be better if you're there than if you're here. She looked up at me for a moment. That same careful, assessing quality in her amber eyes, older than her face. Then she stood up from the bench. She was small beside me, her head below my shoulder. She had been sitting for so long that she moved with the slight stiffness of a body that had been held still by will rather than comfort. She did not take my hand. But she walked close enough that her shoulder was near my arm, and we went to the transit corridor together and took the lift to level 2. Orrin Vaz looked at the two of us when we came through the door of the safe passage office, and he looked at his desk, and he made a small decision behind his eyes. He said, "Sit down." We sat. He opened a terminal. "The Reclamation Authority came to you," he said. "This morning," I said. "They said the tribunal mandate supersedes the Article 16 hold." "Their legal team has argued that position 3 times in 8 months, Vaz said. "They've lost all 3. The charter wording holds." He was already typing. "I'm initiating a full safe passage review. While the review is active, the hold is automatically extended." The Reclamation Authority knows this. It's why they haven't pushed harder. He paused, looking at his screen. The review requires the miner to be present during processing, or the hold lapses. You'll need to stay in this office. We can stay, I said. He looked at the child then directly for the first time. He had the manner of a person who had been in this office long enough to know how to look at a frightened child without adding to their frightened. Steady, not soft, not demanding. I need a name, he said. For the record, whatever name you use. A pause. The child was looking at the floor. Then she said, in the flat-voweled standard she had used with me from the beginning, Sauviel. Sauviel, Vaz repeated, entering it. And you're resident on Kethvaral Station currently. No fixed transit record. I have been here for 9 days, she said. And before that? Another pause longer. I waited. Vaz waited. The terminal screen glowed quietly. Before that, she said, I was on Kethvaral Station and then not on it and then on it again. It is complicated. That's fine, Vaz said. He did not push. The review doesn't require a full transit history, it requires present circumstances. You are here, you are unregistered, and a Federation contractor has filed a welfare hold on your behalf. That's sufficient to open the process. He typed for several minutes. The office was quiet, a small room, 2 chairs on our side of the desk, 1 window looking out onto Level 2's commercial walkway. Outside, the morning crowd of transit workers and travelers moved past. Sauviel sat very still in the chair beside me. She was looking at her hands in her lap. I said quietly, not to any particular purpose, there are grain paste rolls in the machine in the corridor. If you're hungry, we have time. She looked up. Something crossed her face, brief, quickly controlled, that was closer to ordinary than anything I had seen in 3 days. The machine on this level or the Level 3 machine? She asked. This level. The Level 3 machine had a fault in its heating element. The rolls come out cold. I noticed that, she said, and something that was almost carefully, a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth and then disappeared. I got up and went to the corridor machine and came back with 2 rolls. We ate them while Vaz processed the review forms, and the morning moved around us, and the Reclamation Authority was somewhere else in the station doing whatever it does. And for a while, it was just a quiet room and warm food and work being done in our favor. At 13:12, Vaz looked up from his terminal with an expression that had changed. Sauviel, he said, there's something I need to ask you, and I need you to answer it honestly because it changes what happens next. He kept his voice level, as if the question were ordinary. Is your transit record suppressed by your own action or by someone else's? A very long pause. Mine, she said. And the reason for the suppression? She looked at the window. The Level 2 commercial walkway, the transit workers going past. I did not want to be found, she said, by anyone, including the people who would help me. Including me, I said. Including you, she said, at first. She looked down at the grain paste roll in her hands. You did not ask anything, you only gave food, that was different. Vaz was very still at his desk. Sauviel, he said, I need to know your registered bloodline affiliation. It's in the Velasari registry and I can find it, but it will take time I may not have before 1447. If you tell me now, I can verify it quickly and act on what I find before the authority returns. Another long silence. I watched her. She was looking at the roll in her hands. Her pointed ears had folded slightly forward again, the wariness expression. But underneath it something else was moving, something that looked, for the first time, like a decision being made voluntarily rather than under pressure. She set the roll down on the edge of Vaz's desk. She stood up. She walked to the identification pillar set into the office wall, the standard compact biometric interface, present in every safe passage office on every waystation in the network, and she placed her right hand flat on the contact surface. The pillar's interface lit in pale blue, a soft tone. Then the screen displayed the registry return. Vaz read it. He sat back in his chair. He was quiet for a moment in the specific way of a person who has just had their understanding of the last 3 hours reorganized entirely. Then he said, "Oral, do you know what you filed a welfare hold on?" "A child who was hungry and alone," I said. "That's what I filed it on." He looked at me. Something in his expression was caught between professional composure and something that was not quite awe but was in the same neighborhood. "Her mother," he said carefully, "is Velasquez Savarmi. She is the sovereign matriarch of the Velasari compact remnant, the surviving governing authority of a house and bloodline the Reclamation Authority has been attempting to dissolve for 4 years. He paused. The dissolution process requires the sovereign matriarch to be either deceased, legally incapacitated, or formally stripped of standing by the charter tribunal. None of those conditions have been met, but the tribunal has been systematically processing every Velasari national it can find under the dissolution protocols as a pressure mechanism, as a way of eroding the house's standing by reducing the population that can be counted as part of it. He paused again. If Soviel had been processed under the dissolution protocols before anyone formally documented her presence and status on this station, her compact registered existence as the sovereign matriarch's heir would have been not erased, but legally complicated in ways that would have taken years to unravel. He looked at Soviel, who was standing at the identification pillar with her hand still on the surface, watching him with amber eyes that gave nothing away. "She's been hiding. She's been hiding because she was trying to reach this station from wherever she came from without being found, and the Reclamation Authority got here first." I looked at Soviel. She took her hand from the pillar. "I was almost here," she said. It was the first time her voice had carried anything other than flatness. There was something in it, not quite tired, not quite wry, something that had been held back for 9 days. "I was almost to the safe passage desk. I ran out of chits. I could not get through the level 4 corridor without a transit chip registration. I had to come down to level 3 and wait." "For 9 days," I said. "I thought someone from my mother's household would come," she said. "They were supposed to follow. Something went wrong. I did not know what, and I could not ask without being found." "So you sat on the bench?" "So I sat on the bench," she looked at me, "and then you sat on the bench, and you gave me food and you did not ask anything." A pause. "I watched you for a long time before I took the bread. I was watching to understand what you wanted." "I wanted you to eat," I said. "Yes," she said, "that is what I eventually decided." Her voice was very quiet. "It took me a long time to decide. I have not met many people who wanted only that." Vaz made 4 calls in the next 20 minutes. The first was to the Safe Passage Regional Coordinator. The second was to the Compact Legal Authority's Duty Officer. The third was to the Reclamation Authority's Senior Station Representative, the same tall woman who had come to the concourse, to notify her that the Article 16 review had returned a compact protected status determination, and that all dissolution protocol processing claims against the registered minor Soviel were permanently suspended, not just held. I listened to the third call. The senior representative's voice came through the terminal speaker, controlled and precise, and I could hear in it the moment she received the registry return that Vaz transmitted alongside the suspension notice. The silence that followed it was brief, 2-3 seconds, and then she said, in a tone I had not heard from her in the concourse, a tone that was still professional but had lost the particular quality of certainty it had carried before, "Confirmed. We will process the suspension notice. Thank you." The fourth call was outgoing to a frequency Vaz dialed from a separate card he kept in his desk drawer. He spoke in standard formally, using full honorifics. "I am Oren Vaz, Safe Passage Officer, Kethveral Station Level 2. I have a confirmation of presence and status for a minor of Velasari Compact Registry, processed this morning under Article 16 Welfare Hold. The minor is safe and present in this office. I would respectfully request contact guidance for the registered household. A pause, a voice from the other end, also in standard, speaking very carefully. Vaz made a note. He ended the call. He looked at Soviel. An envoy will be on station within 14 hours, he said. He said to tell you that the word is, he used a phrase in Velasari. I'll attempt the pronunciation. He read it from his notes. It was a short phrase, 4 syllables. Soviel closed her eyes for one moment. When she opened them, the careful, sealed expression had shifted into something I had not seen on her face in 3 days. It was not joy. It was too careful for joy, too much still held in. But it was relief. The specific relief of a person who has been carrying a weight for a long time and has finally set it down in a place that can hold it. It means the route is clear, she said. It is what she says when I have navigated something difficult. She looked at Vaz. She was watching. She knew where I was. She would have moved on the situation directly, Vaz said, but doing so would have triggered an emergency dissolution protocol under the Charter Tribunal mandate that could have accelerated the process against you rather than protecting you. She needed you to reach safe passage under a valid hold before she could act without risking the dissolution timeline. He paused. It was a narrow corridor. Yes, Soviel said. She was quiet for a moment, then she looked at me. If you had not sat on the bench. I sat on the bench, I said. If you had not given food. You were hungry. She looked at me for a long moment with those amber eyes that had been watching me for 3 days from a distance, and were now watching me from very close. My mother will want to thank you, she said. Formally, she will ask to meet you. That's not necessary, I said. I know it is not necessary, she said. She will want to do it regardless. She is, a brief pause, something that might have been the beginning of a younger person's expression surfacing through the older one she wore. She is thorough about these things. I'm a supply contractor waiting on a manifest dispute, I said. I'm not anyone who needs formal thanks. You are someone who sat on a bench, she said, and gave food to a child nobody was looking at. In my mother's language, there is a word for that. It means something like the person who sees clearly when others have chosen not to. It is not a common word. It is not given often. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not sure there was anything useful to say. I looked at Vaz, who was looking at his terminal with the expression of a man who has decided to be very interested in his paperwork for the next 30 seconds. I looked at the window, at the level 2 walkway, at the ordinary traffic of an ordinary Tuesday in the low season. Is your mother well? I asked finally, because it was the most honest question I had. A pause. She is tired, Soviel said. She has been fighting for 4 years. She will be less tired now. Good, I said. That's good. The envoy arrived at Kethvaral station 11 hours later, which was faster than 14. He was a compact, gray-haired Velasari man in the household colors of House Velasaketh, and he came to the safe passage office with 2 others, and with the kind of quiet efficiency that means every detail of the situation has been understood before the door is opened. He looked at Soviel and said something in Velasari, short, and she said something back, also short. And then they stood for a moment with that particular stillness of 2 people who have not seen each other in a long time and are currently in a room where composure is required. He looked at me. He said in careful standard, "She told me what you did." I filed a welfare hold, I said. The provision was available. She told me about the bread, he said, on the first morning before anything else. I didn't have an answer for that. He reached into his jacket and produced a small folded document, a formal Velasari household acknowledgement, I learned later, the kind that constitutes a legal record of debt and gratitude under compact covenant law. He held it out to me. "From the sovereign matriarch," he said, "and from her household, and from her daughter who asked that the record reflect specifically the bread." I took the document. It was written on pressed fiber paper in a script I could not read. At the bottom was a seal, and below the seal, in standard, a single line. He saw clearly when others chose not to. I folded it and put it in my breast pocket, next to where the hold slip had been. "Tell her she's welcome," I said. "Tell her daughter to eat well." He nodded once, formally, and then turned back to Sauvielle, and the two of them moved toward the corridor with the other two household members in a quiet, practiced cluster that closed around her the way a hand closes, not confining, just present. Protection that had finally arrived. At the door, Sauvielle stopped. She turned. She looked at me across the safe passage office. At the bench, the window, the tin I had set on Vaz's desk while I was reading the document. She looked at me with those amber eyes that had been watching me for 3 days from careful distances, and were now watching me from across a room at the moment of departure. "The roles on this level are better," she said. "They are," I said. "I will remember that," she said. It was not quite what she meant, but it was still what she had the words for, and in 3 days I had learned to hear what lived underneath the words she chose. She turned and went with the envoy, and the door closed, and I was left in a quiet safe passage office with Oren Vaz and an empty desk and a folded document in my pocket. Vaz looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he said, "You know, in 31 years on this desk, I have processed a lot of Article 16 holds. Most of them are family members who lost a child in a transit queue, or aid workers, or the occasional embassy attaché." He paused. "I have never had one filed by a supply contractor because a child looked hungry." "She was hungry," I said. "I know," he said. "That's what I mean." My manifest dispute was resolved the following morning. I collected my 6 containers of agricultural compound, loaded them into my cargo hauler, and filed my departure clearance. Standard procedure. Nothing remarkable. Before I left, I stopped at the Level 2 safe passage office. Vaz was at his desk. "The Reclamation Authority," I asked. "Suspended their sweep this morning," he said. "The Sovereign Matriarch's legal team filed a full compact challenge to the dissolution timeline overnight. It will take time, these things always take time, but the tribunal instrument has been stayed pending review." He looked at me. The narrow corridor got a little wider. "Good," I said. "You're leaving." "Supply run," I said. 4 more stops on this contract." He nodded. Then he said, "You know what she was before she started sitting on the Level 3 bench." "I know what Vaz's terminal told me," I said. "I didn't know while I was sitting there." "I know," he said. "That's the part I keep thinking about." I thought about it too, during the 16-hour haul to my next stop, the cargo hauler running quiet through the ringbelt transit lanes, with Kethvar's amber light diminishing behind me. I thought about the bench, and the bread, and the way a small hand had come across the space between us in 4 minutes, and taken what was offered without negotiating the terms of the offering. I thought about a child who had been sitting in a busy hall for 9 days while everyone looked past her, and I thought about all the halls I had sat in, all the contracts, all the transit days, and I asked myself how many benches I had walked past without sitting down. Not a comfortable question, not one I recommend asking too often, but the honest ones rarely are. I have the household document in a frame on the wall of my small apartment on Kethvan Station, where I winter between contracts. I have the hold slip in a small box in the drawer beside it, KV7394, the timestamp at 1447, my contractor registration number in the lower left corner. A narrow slip of laminated station print. Nothing remarkable. My grandmother would have said, "You feed what is hungry, you sit with what is alone." I sat on a bench and I opened a tin, and a small hand reached across, and everything else followed from there. That is all it was. That is all it ever needs to be.